With the budget only now literally a couple of weeks away, I want you to watch this clip with me where Rachel Reeves yesterday, the International Investment Summit, was pressed on national insurance contribution increases for businesses. Now, she's a politician. She could have just given a straight answer, but as you would expect, there are no straight answers in politics, right? The question is, if you increase national insurance contributions for businesses, are you breaking a manifesto promise that you campaigned on? A very, very simple yes or no answer. This is what she had to say.
Did Labour's manifesto pledge not to increase national insurance extend to businesses?
Well, you've read our manifesto, and it was very clear. It was about taxes on working people, our commitment not to increase. Our manifesto is very clear that we would not be increasing income tax, national insurance and VAT on working people. Those were the commitments in our manifesto.
So if you increase national insurance for companies in your budget, you will not have broken a manifesto pledge?
Well, we will set out our tax policy at the budget in a couple of weeks' time, but the commitments in our manifesto were specific around taxes on working people.
Well, you said you wouldn't put national insurance up. What you're saying, though, is if you put it up for businesses, actually you would not be breaking a manifesto promise. Is that correct?
Joel, you've read our manifesto, and our manifesto was really clear. Our manifesto was really clear in black and white that that commitment was around taxes on working people.
Now, I don't know about you, but I think that the answer to that question is pretty straightforward and should have been a straightforward one that she could have answered. If the language during the campaign was correct and the language in the manifesto is correct, they did say they would not increase income tax and national insurance contributions on working people. So technically, they would not be breaking a manifesto promise if they increase national insurance contributions on businesses. However, one of the key things that we need to remember here is that, and I've been saying this on the channel for some time, the largest pots of money that the government is able to generate in tax revenue comes from income tax and national insurance contributions. And whilst there is this specific wording, and this is semantics around working people, the fact that you have to increase national insurance contributions almost does constitute a break in your promise, but just not in the literal fashion because of the words that you've used when campaigning in your manifesto. I just did not see how they would get away with not increasing income tax and national insurance contributions. And this is kind of a backdoor loophole that they can use to increase national insurance contributions, that tax that employers pay for the employees. Now, here's the kicker, and this is what I think Labour is going to run into a little bit of an issue. Yesterday was the International Investment Summit. The idea was to attract investment into the UK. And when you look at the UK economy, we have a large cap, small cap, medium cap companies in the economy, right? And this change, if they do bring it in a couple of weeks' time, isn't necessarily going to impact the large cap companies, the multi-million pound, hundreds of million pound businesses that have money just lying around that they can put towards this. No, it's not going to impact them. It's going to impact small and medium-sized businesses. And there are more small to medium-sized businesses in the UK than there are large-cap people. And with the way this is being kind of presented as a tax on employers, a tax on business, it's almost as though it's not going to be passed on in some way, or it's not going to impact the working person in some way, shape, or form. And it's been really interesting reading some of the articles this morning and some of the interpretations that have come out off the back of this, because if you've seen on the thumbnail, it means that potentially it could impact your next pay rise, because as the business that you work for potentially has to pay more to have you employed, they're going to have to try and recoup that money, save that money in other areas. And if they're going to offer you a pay rise, this will have to be taken into consideration. Now, I do want to read an outtake from an article that's actually in the Telegraph right now. The points that they make are really, really interesting. I'm just going to read this right here. It says, effectively, national insurance is a tax on jobs. You can make a distinction between employee and employer's contributions, but in reality, it is all a tax on jobs. It goes on to say, a rise in national insurance will not bring pay cuts, but it would put the brakes on future pay rises. And it also says here, when you look at the next round of pay reviews, companies will say our total compensation will go up by X, and a portion of that is now taken up by our national insurance contributions, which means the amount we can raise those salaries by is slightly lower. So what I'm trying to say here is that this is not going to be something that if they do bring it in, it's not going to have some kind of consequence on working people. This is almost like an indirect tax in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's going to be a case of you getting less in a pay rise, or simply we have an impact in terms of small and medium-sized businesses having to find this money and then have less money to invest in their business, maybe employ more people, there is going to be a material impact. And the biggest challenge is if they are so adamant and so bullish on growing the economy, how does this lean towards growing the economy if they introduce this at the end of the month? One of the things that I've been hearing about, and there are loads of ideas that are being bandied around at the moment in terms of what Labour could do. And one of them that I kind of resonate with, because as you know, we've been talking about, how do you tax kind of like the more wealthy in society? And this doesn't necessarily, in my head, and I'd love to know what you think about this, even if they did this as a suggestion, I don't think it necessarily targets the right kind of people, right? So what they could do, and this is an idea that's been bandied around, is that you could increase the tax for anyone earning over £150,000 by 1%, and that will generate a lot of income. But my argument to that is, well, that isn't necessarily targeting the uber wealthy who have assets who generate income from that and are able to use tax loopholes. So still you're putting a tax on working people, although it be at the highest kind of like level, because at £150,000 plus, you are going to be in the top 1% of earners in the UK. But if you're a PAYE employee, your tax burden is pretty high. The amount of your take, I mean, look, this is a luxury, I can completely understand, but the amount of tax that you're paying is absolutely high. So are there not other ways in which they can generate money? Is this the most cost-effective way, or effective way, I should say, to do this, bearing in mind that the agenda is we need to grow the economy? There are lots and lots of questions. And if this isn't in the budget at the end of the month, I'll be extremely surprised, because I still sit on the side of the case that income tax and national insurance contributions are about 46% of the government's revenue when it comes to tax. It is the largest portion. How can you campaign in a manifesto and say you're not going to increase income tax or national insurance? I just don't see that being the case. And this would be a very, very clever loophole that they could use to increase national insurance and have it not be a direct tax on working people. This is all semantics, and it really depends on how people take this. I've been speaking to people who I know who are in business right now, and that combined with capital gains tax and all this other stuff that is coming in, a lot of people are kind of like, well, what do we do? And I kind of share that sentiment, to be honest. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Is this semantics? Is this breaking a promise? Is this breaking their promise that they ran on? Or is it safe territory because they're not taxing working people? Albeit, it's an indirect tax. Let me know.